Today is an early Tuesday in August. It's a Tuesday sandwiched between an episode releasing to the game with a ton of stuff to do, the announcement of an expansion being announced to the community with a ton of stuff to do, and a demo that starts next weekend for that expansion with a ton to do. It also happens to be a Tuesday that's dropping an immense patch into the game, which also gives us a ton of stuff to do. So today, guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about more stuff that's going on with the game and this enormous patch that is clearly laying the foundations for the upcoming expansion. As you guys may remember, when Heart of Thorns came out, when the release launched, basically they just clicked a switch and then we all got to play without having to do any massive downloads or clocking off servers and so on. And clearly that's what they're going for here with Path of Fire as well. It means that this enormous patch not only has a bunch of stuff in the back end, but the front end too, and it's about the size of Guild Wars 1. Truly huge stuff here. And, well, the patch notes are so long that they actually hit the forum post limit and the devs themselves cut out a huge amount of the patch notes of really important stuff. But never fear, I'm here and I'm going to tell you guys just exactly what's going on. Coincidentally, right as this patch launched, the European data servers for Guild Wars 2 and several other games actually kind of blew up and exploded. So all of us living in Europe or who have accounts connected to Europe in any way, even though I play Guild Wars 2 on an NA account, we actually can't log in. So like half the community can play at the moment, but the rest of us are just sort of watching from the sidelines, hoping to get in for ourselves. And I'm in exactly that position. It means that this video, I'm not quite sure what the footage will be for you guys, but trust me, everything we're going to be talking about and we'll show off the patch notes will all be relevant. I'm doing the best I can for as long as the game is down. So, I mentioned this was a big patch. Actually, one big thing that you will notice as soon as you trigger it is we have a new launcher. So, for the first few years, we had one launcher, then Heart of Thorns came out, and through that era, we had a different launcher, and it was just changed to look like this. So, it's actually an improvement. The launcher is probably the most interesting thing to a lot of people. The art's quite nice. It shows a mounted character, and this is all fairly interesting. But it actually has better functionality now. You'll notice that you've got a direct link to recent updates and patch notes, and that's always been something obvious that Guild Wars 2 should be doing, that it will be for the Path of Fire era. So you can really feel that transition happening now, guys, as we move away from Heart of Thorns. And it's things like this that make it feel like a lot's going on, right? So in no particular order, I'll talk to you about most of the big changes that have occurred, starting with just general things. There are some new options that have gone in the game, and some of you guys won't care about this, but some others of you will care enormously. I think I put myself into that latter category. There's a new section for muting various sound effects. So if you hate people that use, say, the Dreamer with the whinnying unicorns with tramp stamps on them spinning past you constantly in Zerg fights, you can now actually disable the sounds of those projectiles, but generally speaking, keep a lot of the other stuff. So you have a lot more control now. That it's, I believe, a drop-down box, and you can select all kinds of different things for muting different sound effects. So that's quite nice. Another general change that came into the game is that several new collections for the upcoming expansion are visible. Even worse than that, actually, for the 50% of us who could log in on this patch, there was some kind of bug that meant people could get them instantly, and some people have already finished them. This is like finishing rewards for the expansion without potentially having even bought the expansion weeks before the expansion comes out. Crazy, and I guess the devs will have to deal with that. However, do some kind of rollback on those specific accounts if they can, or take those goodies away from those people. But that was totally a thing, and some people were documenting it. Nonetheless, for us, whether we've triggered the bug or not, you can still see those collections, and they've done a lot of reshuffling in the achievement section. Remember, with the new expansion coming out, there's going to be a lot more bloat, and they have to rework how a lot of that stuff is displayed to us. Otherwise, it would just become a bit of a mess. So, yeah, lots of general shifting around there. Here's a general change that I'm super excited about and glad to talk about very early in this video. It's to do with Revenants. So as I just mentioned, we're kind of moving out of the Heart of Thorns period in this absolute frenzy of updates and changes and things going on. But they took the time to make a change for the Rev class that was one of my big disappointments with Heart of Thorns when it came out. It really feels like right at the end of HOT, they're just slamming out these things that address old issues. So you guys may remember when the Revenant was announced to us, there was a specific blog post that talked about the lore of the Revenant and the fact that as we played Revs, we would be having conversations with the legends we were channeling, that they were these entities that were inhabiting our brain, and they weren't us, but it was kind of like we were schizophrenic to an extent, and that we could actually communicate with them, and that this would be happening quite frequently. That all sounded really exciting. It sounded like juicy opportunities to deliver interesting lore on some really cool characters like Jarlis and like Shiro and like Maddox. But the devs, once the game came out, never really paid off on this. And it'd always been a little bit vague as to whether they had just wanted us to RP to a greater extent that we were having these conversations. But generally speaking, when Heart of Thorns came out, this disappointed myself and many others. It made it as a disappointment into my big review of Heart of Thorns. Generally, we just get growls and grunts and grasps, and that's it. As of this patch, Revenants are speaking to their legends as they travel around the world. Just dropped in there out of nowhere. That's so cool. Another complaint from Heart of Thorns has been addressed. Now, I believe it is race and gender specific, because they had to get all these voice actors. For every line they did for this, they had to get the male human voice actor to do it, and then the female human, and then the Asura and the Char, and so on and so on. So because they got all these voice actors to come in and do this work, there's a chance that they may have done like actual specific dialogue based on race. So for example, if you're a Norn and you're very familiar with Ogden, perhaps you might be interacting with Jarlis a little bit different. I don't know to what extent that goes on. I've only seen clips because the community is kind of scrabbling around to figure out everything that these characters say, but I think that's brilliant. Really cool. I'm very happy to see they're addressing that stuff, and it's clear why they're doing this, obviously, guys, right? It's because in the expansion, we're getting more elite specializations, and the devs have listened to so many criticisms about how little lore there was behind those elite specs, and we've seen that they've put a lot of effort into that. Now, clearly, the Revenant's going to get a new legend in the new expansion. They're going to become the Renegade, and they're going to be able to channel a female Char called Carla Scorchrazor. And this is just a sign that when you get that as a Rev, all that lore will be there in place. And I guess they retroactively went back and did that for Heart of Thorns 2. It's great. Now, I haven't had a chance to play, but if they also went one further and made all of the Maddox sound effects as him just sounding like a monkey and asking for bananas, I think I will comfortably declare this the greatest patch there ever has been or ever will be. Moving on, there was a little bit of data mining that happened with this patch as well. I thought I would talk to you guys about. If you haven't noticed on my channel already, I already did a video on the biggest thing. The world map has changed in game now, and if you do a bit of mining, you can get an even bigger one. Really fascinating. They've extended the boundaries of the world map a huge amount, and that again is another thing that I was upset about with Heart of Thorns, that the new expansion seems to really have been able to tackle. So great stuff there. There's also suggestions at the expansion's armor sets that are coming out now. It looks like there's going to be about 4 new armor sets at least, which is double what Heart of Thorns had, and more concerns and things are being alleviated on that one. Scrolling quickly on to some other changes that have come with the game, let's talk about World vs. World and PvP. So both of these formats have had big updates recently. PvP getting the automated tournaments, World vs. World getting the pip system and getting a legendary back piece of its own. And those were pretty big changes. They were very recent, the competitive pack. Well, the devs have done something extra now. One of the other big complaints with Heart of Thorns that is not a complaint I necessarily shared so much, but I could understand where people were coming from. But as somebody who participated in this content, it wasn't so much my own problem. People liked legendary armor. People didn't like you couldn't get legendary armor unless you were a raider. Why did I have to be someone who cared a lot about PvE endgame in order to get legendary armor instead of the World versus Worlders and the dedicated PvPers? Shouldn't they have opportunities too? So there's a lot to go in on this, but basically this patch has added that functionality now to the game. World vs. Worlders can get it, PvPers can get it, especially for World vs. World. I think Legendary Armor is awesome because World vs. World, in my opinion, is the place where there is the most build diversity in the game, the most use of stat swapping and specifically rune swapping. I've had a huge amount of fun in World vs. World being able to rune swap because of Legendary Armor, but that's a very small group of people. Well, now you can do that. I think back to all those legendary armor releases and videos and trailers that they've done over the Heart of Thorns days where people have just hated on it because they've said, oh, I can't get it because I don't raid, and now there are opportunities everywhere. There's a lot of discussion that can come out of this though because they didn't do it perfectly, and it clearly was a bit of a rush job towards the end just to satisfy people rather than being like a really amazing implementation. And there's not exact parity, right? It's hard to compare the efforts of PvE and World vs. World and PvP in the first place, but quite clearly PvP, in my opinion, is the easiest way to do this, and it's very cheap on your time, specifically compared to raiding and World vs. World. Honestly, I haven't looked into too much of the discussion. I'd love if the comments could pick up on what they like or don't like about it, but at least it's some small, at the very least, resolution to the whole, oh, raids only legendary armor thing, and that's been put to bed before Heart of Thorns moves out, which I think is also very cool. Sticking with World vs. World, another very big change has happened in there for this release. Again, ties into Heart of Thorns early stuff. And what did Heart of Thorns give us? It gave us gliding. Around that time, those of you who are super nerds and watch all of the streams and so forth, like I have found myself doing for the past 2 years, you may remember the devs did once upon a time talk about the prospect of adding gliding to World vs. World. Gliding was this big thing that changed the way we explore, but it hasn't existed in that game type. And it feels a bit fiddly and it feels a bit weird, and if you're a big PvEer and you go to World vs. World, you're going to find yourself jumping off of cliffs quite frequently to splat and remember, oh god, yeah, I don't have a glider. It wasn't the best solution. And more than that, the idea of gliding being World vs. World could be an exciting thing. People bombing various strategic locations by gliding in on surprise attacks and stuff. That's all very cool, especially when you think about like stealth gliding and so forth. But how do they do it? In the early days of Heart of Thorns, they said, look, we've got a lot of focuses. If we're going to do it for World vs. World, we want to make sure that we do it right. And they want to make sure that, you know, it's given an opportunity to flourish. They could have Siege, for example, that interacts with gliding so you can snipe people out of the sky with Ballister and so forth. Well, this patch has added World vs. World gliding. I haven't been able to go in and tour what they've done to the Borderlands and the Desert Borderlands and Alpine and the Eternal Battlegrounds, but they say that they've adjusted terrain specifically for it. I guess this is to stop people easily cheesy gliding over keep walls and so forth. Maybe they've added some new opportunities for Zergs to actually get in the air so that they can start moving around. You can fight as you are gliding and you can try and drop in. You can attack people in the sky. A developer specifically talked on Reddit about being excited to see a Dragon Hunter F1 pull and pluck someone out of the sky. So all of those fun moments should happen. They also have had to play a little bit around with how to give people gliding. And why that is because World vs. World is a core experience for Guild Wars 2, not a Heart of Thorns only experience, but gliding is HOT only. So here we're seeing more weird fiddly stuff with the way that they've done their business model for POF. And so what this means is you unlock gliding in World vs. World with a new ability from the World vs. World ability trees, which are a bit like masteries but not and predate the mastery system. But so what that means is I believe this is what this means. If you have a Path of Fire only account, and in theory you should never be able to glide, you will still anyway be able to go to World vs. World, level up a few times in World vs. World, or rank up, sorry, a few times in World vs. World, and then buy that ability there, which will allow you to glide from within World vs. World. So it's kind of gliding as a core thing specifically for when it comes to World vs. World. Very interesting, and they had to do that. But with that kind of weird, odd part of the design out of the way with, they opened up themselves up to actually put it in there. They also said, I believe ballisters do have a special ability to pinch people out of the sky and so forth. I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to go. It seems like a big change for World vs. World. And as exciting as that is, that can also be a scary thing. We know that World vs. World has loved the Alpine Borderlands and the metas that have developed there and the processes that players undergo there. And this is going to be a big shake-up to that. Hopefully moving the combat and, you know, the routes that people take and stuff into a positive direction. I guess time will tell. The other thing, a little bit like something I was talking about earlier, we've got with the Revenant speaking to their legends, we've got a change today, but it's clearly paving the way for a change in the future. For the entire time until this announcement came out, another patch itself of World vs. World gliding, people have been asking me, hey, WP, can you ride mounts in World vs. World? When POF comes out, can I ride my mount in there? And that sounds like a lot of fun, but it also represents a big shift, just like gliding did. For as long as gliding was never in there, I think the answer was pretty obvious. Yeah, they didn't give us gliding, so why would they give us mounts? It sounds like a cool idea, but it's too odd. It would affect things too much. But now that they've done gliding, I actually think this could be because in the future, once POF comes out, the World vs. World team are going to look at how they can put mounts into World vs. World as well, so that that could be a meaningful part of the gameplay there. And that could be huge. People love to bag on the Desert Borderlands, but when you think of stuff like mounts coming into World vs. World, mounts might be just what the Desert Borderlands need to move around that bigger environment and make that feel just as fun as Alpine. I'm not saying that the size of the map is the only problem it has, but they've been doing little things to affect that for a long time, and if mounts get into World vs. World eventually as well, then that's going to change things. So will gliding, by the way. Gliding in the Desert Borderlands already opens up a lot more movement, especially in the Desert Borderlands, where there's lots of verticality if you really think about it. So very, very interesting stuff, and I think these are exciting times to be a World vs. World player. There's also the fact, of course, that if they can get mounts in everywhere, it becomes a bigger cash cow if and when they start selling skins. But let's not be too cynical. There could be some upsides too. Moving on to a new section, back to PvE, there was a huge amount of changes to fractals. Mostly it's changes to the new fractal, which only dropped in a week ago, to do with the new Arc encounter and challenge mode 100, and just Arc in general, the way he scales at different levels, and specifically with challenge mode 100. Some weird oddities that were happening on his various phases. I haven't really talked to you guys about this on YouTube yet. I need to go back to my episode 6 coverage as soon as I possibly can when we get a bit of breathing room, and I'll talk to you guys more about the Arc fight then. But yes, it was very fiddly. Various mechanics would overlap. Some mechanics would just never trigger, allowing you to cheese kills. I've killed Arc twice, and both times, really, it was because we got lucky and a certain ability didn't trigger after a certain point in the fight. So lots of fractal changes there and some other generic stuff, but generally speaking, just more quality of life and what those fractal diehards have been looking for. And that's a lot of the PvE players at the moment. We haven't had a raid for a while. Moving on to another section, current events. So we've actually heard quite a lot from the current event team here. They mentioned on the episode 6 Ask Me Anything that they had been working on cat-based technology. Well, it's in. So they've added a new vendor, a new NPC. There's a new merchant has arrived, interior guys, who sells toys that you can play with your cats in your home. Oh god, I mean, I haven't had a chance. Apparently if you use one of the toys, like a spray bottle on the bloodstone cat, it goes mental and rips your face off and kills you. I'll show you what this is like when the servers are up. I'm sure Boots is itching to come and play that with me in the next cat video we do, where we collect some of the ones we're missing. Brilliant. Other interesting stuff, I think this has eluded a lot of people, but there has been an update to Alexander's achievement. So, people who have been watching the game very closely will know that there is a current event achievement, or was a current event achievement, that was something no one had ever got. They can actually put achievements into Guild Wars 2 that don't appear on any APIs and aren't transparent to any of us until someone in the community gets it. Until there is one player out there who earns an achievement, it can be in the game and just secret, and no one knows about it. And so one of these achievements, of which there could be any number in Guild Wars 2, one of them was to do with current events. And we knew about it because the dev had talked about it, but no one could figure out how to claim the damn thing. It kind of has a boring conclusion to this story. It looks like it is just because the leyline anomalies were bugged and you had to do the event with, like, absolutely immaculate technique so that they wouldn't gather the magic or something. But apparently that is now fixed. It's much more possible. They've changed the way that it will scale, and now we can kind of go and get that achievement. I'll try and dedicate some time in a video or a stream to show that off to you all. Though they have done some shuffling around. There's like some new side story categories in the achievement UI. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of stuff's been shuffled around. And yeah, so current events have had some little things, but maybe not too much. There were some rebalances to the Bloodstone creatures. There were some rebalances to the bandit bosses, and a little bit of flavor text description to go along with that. So there you go, guys. That's kind of the general stuff that happened with this patch, and a huge amount of what's changed with Guild Wars 2 today. Beyond that, there is balance. This wasn't just a general patch, this was a balance patch too, and an enormous one at that. This balance patch is definitely there to carve space out for the upcoming elite specializations. Tempest, for example, has had its damage reined in to push it more into the niche it was always supposed to be, which is more of a support spec than anything else. This means that when Weaver comes out, Weaver can be the badass big damage guy, and everybody's happy that both can exist alongside one another. But what that does mean is for the next 5 weeks or so, the Tempests are going to be smarting a bit from their nerfs. It's a huge balance pass. They did a lot of really intelligent things in some places, there's a huge number of power engie changes that I am massively in favor of, and I'm really glad to see. A lot of my huge criticisms I had of power engie recently on the channel have flat out been addressed, and it's great. They've had a lot of fun changes. Ellie's got some interesting stuff where they can AoE res 5 people with their Geyser skill now and automatically cast it, and Arcane's had huge changes. There have been some infuriating changes as well, I suppose, from your perspective. There have been some letdowns. Power Reaper didn't get as much as I was hoping. There have been some really odd ones, like Power Mesmer got some big buffs. It's crazy, guys. It's absolutely huge. All I can do is recommend you check out the patch notes. They are at the top of the description, and scroll to where your specific class is. Massive changes, massive numbers of traits, Grandmaster traits, minor traits, just straight up deleted, rolled into other places, and new ones invented altogether. amazing, really, and I'm super looking forward to seeing how the elite specs in a couple of weeks, the new set, slot into all of this. I don't think it's the full balance patch, by the way, because I know for a fact that Earth specialization does have barrier on it once the expansion's out, and we didn't see that today, so hopefully the Power Reaper dream will still live and it will just be a bit further forward in the future. Hopefully, if you've got something you felt lackluster, that's still yet to come in, it's just going to be a bit closer to POF, but we will see. I kind of don't want the comments today to be bogged down too much by rage and vitriol that comes inevitably with every balance pass, but we will see what you guys want to talk about, and I would love to see you down there. There you go, guys. That is the massive patch that came into the game today. I will get back to episode 6 stuff as soon as possible, and I still got a ton of POF interviews for you, and overviews and information to teach you about the expansion before the demo, where I also have a ton of coverage. It's hectic. It's a madhouse right now, but I hope I'm doing a reasonably good job. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great evening, and I'll see you as soon as I can.